God 90, where we're not afraid of the tough biblical questions, because we will dig through the language, the culture, and the history to find the truth revealed in the words of our Creator.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Jerry Mitchell, your host for Give God 90. My supervisor is not here at the moment for a couple of reasons. She is out doing some things for a friend of ours, and I encourage her to do that. So I am unsupervised at the time, which is okay. I wanted to do this kind of without her anyway, because there's some portions in here that I'm going to be reading, and I want to use a little more harder language than she likes sometimes, but that's okay. I want to remind everyone, please visit the website. Going to be putting some things on there later, maybe not today, but maybe tomorrow. So we will take care of that. Don't forget the books, and for the month of November, if you buy a copy of Inheriting Lies, we'll take a portion of that and purchase Bibles for the people who don't have them. If you like what you hear, don't be afraid of those like buttons. Don't be afraid of the share buttons. Subscribe to whatever platform you're listening on, and make sure you hit that notification bell as well. We get a lot of comments. I mean, a lot of comments. We reach so many people around the world now. It's getting difficult for me to keep up with everybody, so please be patient. There's only one of me. I receive, if you include the phone calls, the messages, and everything else, about 100 inquiries every day. And I don't want to sound like I'm boasting at all. I really don't. I want to use that as an example to show that there are so many people around the world who are actually starving for the true word of our Creator. They really are. People hear pastors, they hear missionaries, they hear them say, "Oh, you've got to follow Jesus." The Christian ones out there, "Oh, you've got to do this, you've got to do that." And then they watch these same people following the ways of the world. Isn't that amazing? They teach one thing and do something else. It's kind of, if you've been listening for a while, you know that I use Matthew 23, where it says the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat and they make these rulings. You have to do this and you have to do that, and then they don't do them. And Yeshua, Jesus, looks at these folks and they say, "No, no, no, no. You do what Moses said to do. You have to be better than your religious leaders, because they will lead you astray sometimes. We try not to. There's some good ones out there, but sometimes they will try and force you to do things and won't do the same thing themselves." I'm going to begin with this example. A couple of verses from Exodus 31, 16 and 17. And it reads, "The Israelites must keep the Sabbath." Now, who are the Israelites? Those are the people who initially were Abraham's descendants, but then they included all of the people who joined with them, all the people who are grafted in, all the people who are adopted, however you want to say that. All right? That's who they are. The Israelites must keep the Sabbath, celebrating it as a permanent covenant for the generations to come. It is a sign between me and the Israelites forever. Of course, forever doesn't just start from now and go forward. It's goes both ways. It encompasses everything. "For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, but on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed." I know a lot of you might be thinking, but the Sabbath was changed. So I'm going to ask you, show me where that is in the Bible. if you're able, but you can't. Don't even, if you want to look for it, you can go ahead and look for it. It's not there. Now, I don't want anyone to be confused about a couple of words here, okay? I know some people get the word worship confused with Sabbath. They're two different things. Worship can be done and should be done often, right? But the Sabbath day of rest is something that can only be done one day each week. Let's go back to Genesis 2:2. The seventh day, God finished the work he'd been doing. So on that day, he rested. Seems plausible, right? But because God rested on the seventh day, not the first day of the week, we are instructed to keep this day separate or different from all the other days of the week. Remember now that the Sabbath day, we must keep it holy. It's amazing. From Exodus 28 and 11. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you will labor and do your work, but on the seventh day is a Sabbath to Jehovah your God, on which you must not do any work, neither you nor your son nor your daughter, your manservant, maidservant, livestock, nor the foreigner in your gates. For in 6 days Jehovah made the heavens and the earth and the sea, and all that is in them, but on the seventh day he rested. Therefore Jehovah blessed the seventh day and set it apart. He makes it different. We don't have the authority to make any other day of the week different. It's not for us to do. Now, I read the Exodus 31 passage that tells us it is a sign. It's a sign between the people who claim the God of Abraham and the Creator himself. But it is also a sign to the people around us, just like all the other instructions we received. Right? Listen to Deuteronomy 28, 9 and 10. Jehovah will establish you as his holy people, a set-apart people. We're different. Just as he has sworn to you, if you keep the commandments of Jehovah your God and walk in his ways, then all the people of the earth will see that you are called by the name of Jehovah, and they will stand in awe of you. Different. We are different. Believers have to be different. We can't say one thing, we can't preach one thing, and then do the things the rest of the world is doing. Now let's look at some examples, because I'm mainly speaking with Christians here now. You know, my Jewish listeners, they already know this stuff. They've already got, they probably already turned me off by now going, oh, he's talking about that. We know all that. Well, I hope they didn't, because they might actually understand something a little better now. At least when I get through with everything I've got here in my notes. We're going to look at how Yeshua, Jesus, taught his disciples about this. One of the most familiar times we read about worship is after what is known as the Last Supper in Mark 14:26. When they'd sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Sounds like worship, doesn't it? Well, there's some things we need to clarify about this. It wasn't a hymn. It was one of David's Psalms. We don't know exactly which one. Now, a lot of people have tried to speculate that this was a Passover meal, and so they would have sung a psalm that was appropriate, but it wasn't Passover. Okay, that was the next day. This was the evening before. We know that because of some other verses in the Bible that described when this was. For instance, the next day, the Pharisees refused to enter Pilate's judgment hall because they did not want to be defiled so they could eat the Passover. That's found in John 18:28. If you think the Last Supper was a Passover meal, it was the evening before. What they did was an act of worship. They did it often. If you look at Luke 14:16, Jesus came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up. As was his custom, he entered the synagogue on the Sabbath. And when he stood up to read, we all know what he read, right? The passage from Isaiah. But as was his custom, yes, Yeshua, Jesus, kept the seventh-day Sabbath. Even after the resurrection, look at what the disciples would do. They would gather to worship, Acts 2:42. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, breaking bread, and to prayer. They gathered together. They gathered together. They would sing some of David's psalms or some of the other writers' psalms. They would eat and they would pray. That's worship. Acts 2:47, 46 and 47, I'm sorry. With one accord, they continued to meet daily. With one accord, they continued to meet daily in the temple courts. Okay? That's where they would meet daily. Every day they would be somewhere on the Temple Mount. And the Temple Mount was a huge place. They're not talking about the temple proper. They're actually talking about around that area. Every day, daily, in the temple courts, and separate, right? They would break bread from house to house. They would eat in each other's homes. They would fellowship in each other's homes, sharing their meals with gladness, being joyfully obedient, and sincerity of heart. Verse 47, praising God and enjoying the favor of all people. And Jehovah added to their numbers daily of those who were being baptized. Daily. They would do these things daily. So when did they observe the Sabbath? Acts 13 and 14. After setting sail from Paphos, Paul and his companions came to Perga in Pamphylia, where John left them to return to Jerusalem. Verse 14. And from Perga they traveled inland to Pisidian Antioch, where they entered the synagogue. Are you ready for this? On the Sabbath and sat down. Seventh day, not the first day, seventh day. Now these are just a few of the places where it's described. And I want to remind you that this I'm getting tongue-tied because I'm getting excited. The disciples taught others to worship often and to keep, actually it's more literally guard the Sabbath day. Not to treat it like any other. You have to be careful with it. It has to be something special. It has to be something different. Now, there's a lot of people that want to get hung up on what you can and can't do. That's not what I'm going to get into today. Okay? I'm strictly speaking about keeping this day different. So my question is, why do so many Christian churches follow a first day or Sunday Sabbath when they, at the same time, claim to be following the teaching of Yeshua, Jesus? Isn't that interesting? Like I said, they will sit there and they will preach one thing to you, and they will do something different. You have to be careful with this. This is something you can call a lot of places out on, too. Now, the Roman Church and Constantine are mainly to blame. And I'm not talking about the Holy Catholic Church here. I'm talking about the early Roman era church. Because about the 4th century, the church ruled that anything Jewish, for lack of a better term, was not to be customary. Anything from the way we track time, right, to what day we keep the Sabbath was basically outlawed by the Roman Church. At the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, Emperor Constantine and the Catholic Church established a Sunday as a civil day of rest because Sunday is so named as the venerable day of the sun. And Constantine was a Mithra worshiper until the day he died. Mithra, if you didn't know, is the name of the Roman sun god. Even on Constantine's arch, no other religious symbols are found except those of sun worshippers. The Council of Laodicea in 364 decreed, Christians shall not Judaize and be idle on Saturday. Here's a major problem. What day did God rest? The seventh day. What day is Saturday? The seventh day. Council of Laodicea in 364. Christians shall not Judaize and be idle on Saturday, but shall work on that day. But the Lord's day they shall especially honor. And, as being Christians, shall, if possible, do no work on that day. If, however, they are found Judaizing, they shall be shut out from Christ. I have a lot of problems with this, as you might tell. No man, let me say this again, no person can stand between you and your Redeemer. No person can stand between you and your Redeemer. No person can stand between you and your Creator. Not even the church. Of course, I'll go on. Because we have to bear in mind that this was during a time when the church considered that the Jews were responsible for crucifying Yeshua, Jesus. But the Jews were actually forbidden by Rome to use capital punishment. That was kept reserved for the Roman government. Even the sign that was written by Pilate's own hand and nailed to the cross, which, by the way, is the very handwritten ordinance that Paul refers to, all right? This was Pilate's way of trying to walk a very, very narrow line. By writing, Yeshua, King of the Jews, and having that as the offense over his head as he was crucified, that is a religious and a political statement. It wasn't the Jews who crucified Yeshua, Jesus. It was the Roman government. It was the Roman soldiers. Now, the Pharisees were the ones who pressed the issue. But let's be real here for a second, okay? Somebody had to do it. It had to be done. And the reason it had to be done is it's part of the Creator's plan. It's to offer the last sacrifice, and it's spoken of actually in Daniel 9:27. He will confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week, he will put an end to the sacrifices and offerings. And on the wing of the temple will come the abomination that causes desolation until the decreed destruction is poured out upon him. Now, I could go into a whole lot of things about this, but I won't because you don't have 3 days to be here. And quite honestly, I don't either. But think about this way. Just because we have prophecy doesn't mean that it will look like what we think it will look like. We can read it, right? And we can wonder, but until we actually see it, we don't know what it's going to look like. The events in prophecy are not coded. Okay, there's no secret code to them. They're written many, many, many years ago. And the people who read them at that time probably understood what they meant. But today, we are blinded by other events. And so we don't have that clear picture of it because we're looking at it differently. We see things through the filters of time and other events. So we don't really have this grasp. And our traditions and our church doctrines get in the way too. Let's be realistic. In 1 Peter 2:21, I use this verse often too. Because Yeshua suffered, he leaves you an example that you should follow in his footsteps. Now again, this is not talking about, just following him to death, right? But I will go back and I will drive this nail in a little further maybe. If he is our example, why are so many Christian denominations not following his example? If they're willing to stand up and preach, you've got to do this and you've got to do that and you've got to do something else, why is what they're preaching different than the one they claim to follow? Do you see the hypocrisy here? Now, not all of them do it, but many, many, many of them do. To be a student or disciple means to learn the teachings that the professor teaches, right? If he's our example, if he's the professor, if he's the teacher, why aren't we doing these things? Especially guarding the seventh day as the Father intended. Now, I know hearing this is going to cause people a lot of distress. A lot of it. And it's okay. You should be distressed. You really should be distressed. It's going to cause you to argue. It's going to cause you to bicker because the people who taught you, you trusted. And here's this guy on a podcast saying they were wrong. And I'm going to give you some reasons they were wrong. I've given you reasons they're wrong. Want some more? How much, how long are you going to let me dance on your toes? How long are you going to let me, beat you over the head with this hammer before you're willing to do something? The first thing I'm going to ask you to do, though, is pray. Okay? Pray about this. Study this out. Work it out between yourself and your Creator in fear and trembling. Go to him and say, Lord, I heard this strange guy say that the Sabbath is on Saturday and we should worship often, and I'm confused. I don't know what to do. Let me ask you this. If you're Christian and you claim to follow Jesus, are you willing to follow Yeshua, Jesus, even if it means being persecuted for what he did, for what you do? If you were able to heal the sick and everybody loved you, that would be kind of easy, wouldn't it? That would be, but think about that. If you were able to heal the sick, everybody thought you were great. Everybody thought you were the bomb. Or as my youngest granddaughter likes to say, the bomb.com, right? If everybody loved you, are you willing to point to the one that your authority comes from? But let's think about if you're able to heal the sick, even if you're able to raise the dead, but everybody hated you. That doesn't sound as glamorous, does it? If everybody hated you, now it's a little easier to say, well, I can do this, but it's not me doing it. I have this gift from my Creator in heaven because I do the things he asked me to do. And he's willing to say, okay, if you do these things and you keep telling people it's me, sooner or later, enough people are going to believe you that they're going to turn to me and say, maybe there's something to this. Maybe there's something to it. I'm not suggesting you change your faith. Not at all. I'm suggesting you put your faith into practice. Put your faith into action. Everybody claims they want to seek the face of God. They claim they want to hear the voice of God. They claim, are you willing? Are you actually willing to hear the voice of God and then do the things that he instructs you to do? You know, I've seen firsthand what can happen. You know, if you're faithful and you absolutely, completely trust your Creator, I've seen what can happen. I've seen it in my family. I've seen it in the people around us. I've seen the blessings poured out on those who choose to be joyfully obedient. Now, I've also seen families torn apart because one person chooses to be joyfully obedient and the other people in the family refuse to give up their traditions. They choose to follow the emptiness that brings sorrow. I don't know why, but they love their traditions more than they love their Creator. It's amazing. I've had people tell me, oh, when I started following the Creator's instructions, when I first heard you and I started doing these things, I felt like I was alone. I was ready to give up. I was ready to just go back to doing the things I used to do until I recognized the blessings that were coming my way. Until I recognized it, I heard it, I felt it, and I understood it. You see, guarding the Sabbath is something that can kind of feel awkward at first, but it doesn't take long to look forward to it. Receiving blessings, it makes you feel a little unworthy at first until you realize you're receiving those blessings because the Almighty Himself finds you worthy to receive them. Again, I'm going to ask you, pray about this. Seriously, pray about it. Listen for the voice of your Creator. If you begin to follow His instructions, are you going to be harassed? Probably by some, but you'll be rewarded by your Creator. There's going to be those who argue with you that, oh, Jesus was raised on Sunday, which is something they really can't prove, not in the biblical timeline. There's no way by any math calculations of any kind that you can count 3 days and 3 nights between Friday afternoon and Sunday morning. It's impossible. But when you put all the Scripture together, instead of getting a picture, what we get's a video of the events that began on what we would consider a Tuesday evening and concluded late on Saturday afternoon and went on into Sunday morning. There's been a great deal written by many people about this. But the interesting thing is, none of the early church fathers, and more recently, no one who began any of what we could consider the Protestant church denominations ever argued with the seventh day being the Sabbath. That's why they call it the Lord's Day. You see how their words and terminology convince you to do things that you might not even think about. It sounded good, right? I trusted that person. They never acknowledged that the Sabbath was changed. Only the Roman Church said no. The early Roman Church said no. They're having some issues with this still today because they did this. While so many people want to restrict their weekly worship to Sunday, my question is this: why? Why do you want to restrict your worship to one day a week when the examples that we have are to worship often and keep the Sabbath different than any other day of the week? Why is that? Pray about it. Study it out. Work it out in fear and trembling with your Almighty Creator, and let me know what you come up with. Let me know what He says to you. Let me know if you're willing to be joyfully obedient, and see what happens. Until Monday morning, I wish you many, many blessings, everyone.